Hey guys, this is EJ Holland with the Wolverine.com, and we're back with another Wednesday live show. Sorry, last week's show was canceled at the last minute. Glad to be with you guys on National Signing Day night, the traditional late period, which doesn't produce that many fireworks, but Michigan did land a nice late signee in Cameron Brandt, three-star defensive lineman who flipped from Stanford, of course, five-star athlete Nicholas Harbor will no longer be talked about on this show after today. He's signed with South Carolina. Before we dive into your questions today, and that's what I'm here for, I'm here to answer your recruiting questions. So make sure to get your questions in the chat box. I want to remind you guys to subscribe to the Wolverine.com today for just $29.99 until August 31st. That gets you premium insider recruiting information on all things Michigan, the football team, basketball recruiting, NIL transfer portal, and so much more. You also get to be part of a great, vibrant message board community over on the Fort. If you're already a subscriber, you can gift a subscription. What better Valentine's Day gift than a subscription to the Wolverine? So make sure to get your loved one a subscription as well. Just $29.99 until August 31st. That gets you through spring football, summer official visit season, and so much more. All right, guys, let's go ahead and dive into the questions. And we already have in the chat box, but if you want to leap the line and get your question in early and contribute to my travel budget so I can go out and recruits on the road, then make sure to click that donate button and leave a super chat. But we'll go ahead and go with our first question, which is literally just one word, and it comes from Sean Paul Anthony, and he asks Jaden. And we all know that means Jaden Davis, top 100 quarterback out of Charlotte, Providence Day in the state of North Carolina. Jaden Davis is Michigan's number one overall target in the 2024 recruiting class, the only quarterback that Michigan is recruiting, which is a bit of a risky business there, but it is what it is. In terms of the latest in the Jaden Davis recruitment sweepstakes, however you want to phrase it. Um, Michigan's still the leader here. You look at the competition, and I wrote something about this earlier in the week, and our producer Hutch has pulled up his profile, and you can see here he is ranked as the number 17 overall recruit nationally and the number two quarterback in the country as well. But when you look at the Davis recruitment, schools that were considered potential threats have landed their quarterbacks. Basically, you've seen Georgia come away with a quarterback commitment, LSU, Florida as well. Sticking with the SEC, Tennessee is a school he visited, but Tennessee invested heavily in NIL this cycle, and they landed a five-star quarterback recruit in 2023. And then you look at Clemson. Clemson was considered the biggest threat to Michigan. I know from talking to those around Michigan, they always viewed Clemson as the biggest threat. Like Clemson's trending for Walker White, another quarterback in the 2024 recruiting class that just made an unofficial visit last weekend. So Clemson could be finding their guys soon. And who does that really leave? That leaves Ohio State, which is looking to potentially get back in the mix there. But there are a little bit of burned bridges when it comes to Ohio State. Remember, Ohio State was making Jaden Davis a priority early, then shifted gears and landed a commitment from Dylan Raiola, who's the number one quarterback nationally. And Raiola, of course, backed out of his commitment to Ohio State. So Ryan Day and company are circling back to Jaden Davis. So Ohio State's one to monitor, but interested to see if they go all in there, if they can repair those bridges, if they're not completely burned. We'll see what happens with Ohio State. But aside from Ohio State, and assuming Clemson gets Walker White, I mean, who am I really afraid of here? North Carolina? North Carolina was the only school that had him on campus in January, and it is the home state school. But am I really that concerned with Alabama? With North Carolina, I would be concerned about Alabama, but they have a quarterback commit already as well. Florida State has a quarterback commit. Um, a lot of these schools haven't really been in contact as of late. So, North Carolina is one I would say is pushing as hard as Michigan. UCF just offered over the weekend. Davis was down in Florida with Cam Newton's organization. They stopped by UCF and he picked up an offer from them. But I mean, am I really concerned about UCF or North Carolina? Both are very inferior programs. So, while Jaden Davis continues to wait, and that is a little worrisome that he's not jumping on board right away, especially in this age of recruiting where NIL can instantly become a factor. And you see there, Davis has an NIL valuation of more than 150K per on three's NIL evaluation or valuation system. You don't want him to wait too long. At the same time, you can look at the flip side of the coin and say, well, there aren't many competitors that Michigan should be afraid of. So it's a little bit of an interesting standoff, I guess. Standoff might not be the right word, but you can look at it from both angles. You can say, well, if you're Michigan, there aren't programs to worry about. If you're Jaden Davis, you don't really have a ton of reason to commit because Michigan is not actively recruiting any other quarterbacks. I think the best solution for Michigan is to go ahead and expand the quarterback board. There aren't many, if any, schools that take the all your eggs in one basket approach, right? And obviously that didn't work out last cycle with Dante Moore. So I think you need to have some backup options. You can still have Davis as the guy, but you give yourself some more options and you give Davis a little more pressure to go ahead and make a decision, commit early, and having him on board early would definitely be beneficial. Michigan hasn't had a quarterback leading a recruiting class since JJ McCarthy, and I think Jaden Davis would definitely help out with peer recruiting. So that's kind of the recap of where we are with Davis as far as a timeline. He was supposed to make a decision in December. That didn't happen. He talked about January. That obviously did not happen. And we already have a question. When do I think Jaden Davis will make his decision? Davis has been on the record saying when the time feels right. So it could be any time, to be honest. Personally, it looks like looking to take it into the spring. But he's kind of giving himself an out, whereas when I saw him, close to the end of the cycle, he was pretty firm on December or said it would likely be December. And of course, that didn't happen. Now he's not setting any type of definitive timeline. Now he's just saying it'll happen when it happens. So we'll see if any other major programs get involved as well. And we'll see if Michigan expands the quarterback board. I think it'll be interesting to see if anything changes with the approach now that Kirk Campbell is in place over Matt Weiss as Michigan's quarterback coach. But at the end of the day, I think the decision to expand the board and the Jaden Davis recruitment in general will all come down to head coach Jim Harbaugh. All right, let's go ahead and move on to another topic. Mark Valentine is next in line. And remember, guys, if you want to skip the line, make sure your question gets answered tonight on National Signing Day. Make sure to leave a super chat. Click that donate button. That money goes directly to my travel budget so I can get out on the road and see recruits across the country. Is the Michigan football program going to build and expand the route recruiting office? I think he just means the recruiting office. They're getting out recruited. I think that's in the cards. I think Jim Harbaugh has been dedicated to expanding the department and adding a little bit more manpower. They added a director of on-campus recruiting position that they didn't have beforehand in Christina DeRuiter a couple of years ago. They've given her additional help. They added an assistant director of on-campus recruiting this past off season. I think there's been more analysts and more personnel guys. You saw the addition of Denard Robinson. You have guys like Connor Stallions that aren't talked about that do a great job as well. But I think the more traditional recruiting guys like Albert Karshnia and Jonathan Hurd Bond, I think they need some help. I think you need guys with more connections, not necessarily to replace Karshnia or Hurd Bond, but in addition to those guys that can do more clerical work. I think you need guys that are well connected. I think you need regional type experts. I think you just need a bigger department in general. From my time at Texas, they had a monster department coming over to my time on the Michigan beat, and it's definitely a smaller operation. So, I think losing Courtney Morgan hurt last year, and there were reasons why that departure happened. So, I'm not going to harp on it too much, but I do think you need to adequately fill his role with a similar type of personality guy with connections and just expand the department overall. And like I said, Jim Harbaugh has shown a willingness to do that. And I think that'll be something they address this offseason. Um, Let's go down to Go Blue 81. And he says, looks like we're looking good with Jacob Oden tomorrow. Any insight? And I know that him and West wanted to play together. Yes, so we are talking Jacob Oden on 300 defensive back out of Harper Woods, an in-stater, a legacy recruit, the son of former Michigan walk-on fullback Rod Oden, who also happens to be the head coach at Harper Woods and is also very actively involved in the Sound Mind, Sound Body organization in the Detroit Metro. I have had my on three prediction in for Jacob Oden since forever. I feel like I've had it in for who knows how long. I need to go back and check that, but I think I put one in like way back sometime last year. This was always a slam dunk for Michigan. Like I said, not he's a legacy recruit, but more than that, he's a guy that has multiple family members that are Michigan alums. He basically grew up around the program, going to games and practices and such. But he also understands the value of a Michigan degree, what it means to be a Michigan man, learning that from his father and other family members that have gone on to have successful careers. He sees the value of that Michigan degree. Um, he's very close to Will Johnson, who he kind of sees as a little bit of a big brother type. They kind of grew up together in the Sound Mind, Sound Body organization. Like I mentioned, Odin is a big part of Sound Mind, Sound Body. Will Johnson's father, Dion, is a co-founder of Sound Mind, Sound Body. So that's a connection right there. And then you add in that's not even the end of the connections. Then you add in Steve Klinkscale, Michigan's co-defensive coordinator. He's actually known Rod Odin for like 20 years. He's literally known Jacob Odin since he was an infant. So Klinkscale's a guy that Jacob and Rod both really, really trust. Jacob kind of sees Clink as a little bit of an uncle figure, but at the same time, Rod, I talked to Rod not too long ago, and he made this pretty clear. He said if Jacob goes and plays for Clink, Clink's going to demand the best out of him because he knows him so well. He's going to bring out the best out of him as well. And I think Jacob really trusts Clink not only as a person, but as a coach and a developer of talent. So all those connections make it a slam dunk for Michigan. That's why I've had a prediction in forever. The only thing that's a tiny surprise here is that Odin is moving up his timeline, which is great for Michigan. He was pretty adamant that he was going to make all 5 of his official visits. That is not happening, obviously, as he is making his decision tomorrow. But yeah, I feel fully confident in my prediction for Odin. I've had it in forever. I love where the Wolverines stand. I love all the connections. I think he's a program kid. I think he's a great fit. Michigan him as more of a nickel. So a lot to like about Jacob Oden. I think he bleeds maize and blue. I think he's a future team captain. And on top of that, I think he's going to be a great peer recruiter, which brings me to the next part of your question with him and Bryce West wanting to play with each other. So Oden was on campus last month, same weekend as Bryce West. They got to connect there. I think Odin is definitely going to actively recruit West and make him a priority target. Remember, Jacob more of a nickel, Bryce West more of a true corner. I think they would complement each other well in the secondary. Bryce West, a top 100 recruit. One of the top cornerback targets on Michigan's recruiting board, along with fellow Ohio native Aaron Scott. And you see our producer Hutch pulling up the Bryce West profile here. He is a top 75 player across the board, the number 35 overall recruit on the On3 consensus. So, like I said, those two guys had a chance to bond together on the weekend visit last month, and like I said, they would complement each other really well. So, I think if Odin does commit to Michigan tomorrow, then that's definitely a recruit he's going to have on his radar. Some of the other guys I think that he'll recruit pretty hard are On 300 linebacker Jeremiah Beasley. Both of those guys are close friends. Beasley being a fellow in-state kid, sound mind, sound body kid as well. He is set to make his decision in March. Five-star 2025 quarterback Bryce Underwood is another guy, part of the Sound Mind, Sound Body organization that I'm sure Odin will recruit. Boo Carter, four-star athlete from Tennessee, has played in some tournaments, Sound Mind, Sound Body, so he's another one. But yeah, I think, with being so active on the 7-on circuit and camp circuit, it's going to be great for Michigan to have him committed if he does Michigan, and just being out there peer recruiting, getting the word out about Michigan. Much like Will Johnson, I think that'll definitely help the Wolverines have him talking to so many major country. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, you guys are getting more Jacob Odin. Like I said, you feel very confident prediction for Jacob Odin, which has been in there for quite some time. Let's go ahead and go down to Des DSE Gundo. And he says, is Kirk Campbell going to start recruiting more than one quarterback? So I wrote this in my scoop piece last week. I was just sharing nuggets. So a lot of you guys have been sleuthing on the internet and noticed that Kirk Campbell followed some other 2024 quarterbacks. I've reached to those 2024 quarterbacks and they have not from Kirk Campbell. So right now, while he's maybe tracking and watching some film of some 2024 quarterbacks, there has been no contact with 2024 quarterback not named Jaden Davis. We'll see if that changes. I hope it changes. You guys know I'm not a fan of the all your eggs in one basket strategy and approach. So many can go wrong, as we saw last with Dante Moore, and Michigan cannot afford to take another project quarterback after back-to-back cycles of doing so. It's the most important. Yeah, you can make the argument Michigan kind of guy in the transfer portal, and that's true to an extent, but you don't want to go, 3 cycles in a row missing on your top guy. You need to land Jaden Davis or find another guy that is comparable to that stature. But yeah, I mean, going down to Noah Helderman, who, for those of you guys that missed it, you can go back and listen to the recording, but giving you a quick synopsis, no true timeline for Jaden Davis. Now, he did talk about December, January. Those never happened. Now it's whenever he feels like doing it, according to him. So we'll see. I do think Michigan still leads, especially with a lack of competition there. We'll see if Ohio State really presses for him. We'll see if Clemson decides to go in on him as opposed to Walker White. But Walker White is trending there. And then I'm not really afraid of North Carolina and UCF. So I still think Michigan's the team to beat for now. We'll see if any other schools jump in the mix as well. And let's go down to Paul Caudill. And he says, is NIL hurting us or just overall recruiting? I do think NIL is hurting Michigan. There's no true set plan on the recruiting trail now. That's not to say that Michigan's not doing a great job with guys on the roster. You're seeing guys make money that are on Michigan's roster. You can easily point to JJ McCarthy. You can easily point to Blake Corum. You can easily point to Zach Zinter and so on and so forth. You saw Colson Loveland get a deal as well, coming off his true freshman season. So, look, I think Valiant and the collectives are doing a serviceable job with the team, but there's still no direct plan for recruiting. I mean, the pitch is here what guys on the team can make, here's what you can make, and Michigan's a transformational, not a transactional program. And that's just not going to play well with guys of the caliber of Nicholas Harbor. I mean, you're not going to get many 5-star recruits, if any, with that type of pitch, and it does become tough with top 100 recruits in general. I mean, the plan right now is for Michigan to still get a base salary in place where you can say, hey, if you're an offensive lineman at Michigan, you're guaranteed to make $200,000 if you stay 4 years. It's just an arbitrary number. So not the number they're necessarily shooting for, but at least that gives you some type of firm number that you can sell to recruits as opposed to just being like, well, Blake Corum plays running back. You can make this Taylor Tatum, or you can make this Jordan Marshall. Like it's all coulds and not guarantees. And other schools are offering guarantees, and I think that's the biggest difference. Let's go to Owen Pastel. And he says, how many commits in the next month? Also, do the three interior defensive linemen this cycle complement each other? All right, let's start with the first one. I will guarantee at least two commitments this month. How about that? I will guarantee at least two. I think Michigan lands Jacob Oden. I know there's another one on deck, and we'll see if they get a third one in. But I think Michigan's off to a better start with the underclassmen as opposed to the 2023 guys for sure. As far as how will the defensive linemen complement each other, um, look, you have a Brooks Barr who's a taller, longer guy. He's more of a project, kind of heavy footed. Still needs to grow into his body a little bit. I think the biggest thing with Brooks is he's still a little awkward in terms of just his movement at his size. Remember, Brooks was a guy that was pretty skinny. He was actually listed as an edge early on. I think he was originally listed at like 250 or 240 pounds, something pretty light. And he's gone all the way past 275. So he added, all that weight in less than a year. And I think he's still getting comfortable with that. But I think he has a lot of potential. I think Barr right now is a guy that you might not hear from, that's going to need some time in the strength and conditioning program, but is going to be a nice step piece and a potential late career starter. I think Roderick Pierce, is a little bit more on the shorter side. I think he's kind of in the Mason Graham type of mold, 6'3", 290 pounds. He actually has pretty long arms despite being on the shorter side. He was a true late senior riser, former Wisconsin commit. You see, he's a 3-star here. I haven't graded as a 4-star. I think he's a guy that's really explosive, really took that big step forward from junior to senior year, does a great job of getting penetration, terrific brute strength as well. So I think Roderick Pierce the third, also known as Trey Pierce, is going to be one of the true steals for Michigan in the 2023 cycle. And then you look at um, the edge guys. You obviously have Americ Kumba, who they're hoping can play maybe more of that Ajabo role, and then Enoetta, who can play more of the Mike Morris role. And then today's edition of Cameron Brandt was really interesting. So they recruited him as a replacement to Collins Anchiampong, who was a bigger edge take this cycle. And so they hope Cameron Brandt can be that, kind of similar to, like I said, Enoetta and that Mike Morris type role. But I see Cameron Brandt more as a Chris Jenkins type. He's not a kid that necessarily bends super well. He's not super explosive on tape, but I see a guy with a nice frame that can add weight, that can easily play at 290 pounds. I see a guy that plays the run really well, and I see a guy that has natural strength as well. So I think Cameron Brandt isn't necessarily a pass rusher. I do think he will eventually play that Jenkins role. I think Ben Herbert's going to have a lot of fun in the strength and conditioning program with a lot of these guys. I think Enoetta, Cameron Brandt, Trey Pierce, Brooks Barr, Merrick Kumba all have the potential to really grow and outplay their rankings under Ben Herbert in the strength and conditioning program, as well as Mike Elston, who's one of the best developers of talent along the defensive line. All right, guys, we have about 6 minutes left. So now is a great time to remind you to subscribe to the Wolverine.com. If you're not already subscribed, it's $29.99 through August 31st of 2023. Also, like this video. Helps with the algorithm, helps other Michigan fans join the chat. And make sure to subscribe to the Wolverine YouTube channel. That is completely free, and we drop new videos all the time. Also, a nice time to remind you to if it's getting late, so if you want to jump the line and get ahead on your questions, make sure to click that donate button, leave a super chat, and you can skip everybody in front of you. Let's go down to Go Blue 81 is next in line. And he says, any word on Justin Scott? He moved his commitment date back. Is that a good thing for Michigan? And how are we with Beasley? Heard Penn State offered. Let's start off with Justin Scott, elite defensive lineman in the 2024 recruiting class. Absolutely love Justin Scott. He's one of the most important targets on Michigan's 2024 recruiting board out of Chicago, St. Ignatius. Um, you look at his ranking here, the number 20 overall prospect in the country. On three, he is the number two defensive lineman and a top 20 prospect as well. And like you mentioned, he pushed back his commitment date. That's definitely good news for Michigan. Had he kept his commitment date of yesterday, I guess it was January 31st, I feel like he would have picked Notre Dame. So I think it's definitely good that he's holding off. Now, you do have some heavy hitters that have gotten involved. Georgia recently extended an offer. Alabama is recruiting him hard as well. But I think Michigan's given him a lot to think about too. I think his preference would be to stay in the Midwest. He's developed a really good relationship with Mike Elston. I think now that the Jim Harbaugh NFL drama is completely over, thank God. That's going to be something that he takes into consideration as well, and that will be helpful with Michigan. So, yes, I do think it's good news that Scott pushed back his decision date. Michigan's still in the mix there and is going to continue to recruit him hard. In terms of Jeremiah Beasley, on 300 in-state linebacker out of Belleville, Michigan. Um, Look, Belleville hasn't been super kind to Michigan, I guess. You obviously had the public Jermaine Crowell, Jim Harbaugh situation, but Crowell is no longer at Belleville. That means there's no Harbaugh enemy in Jeremiah Beasley's corner at all. And the thing about Beasley, man, is he's such a great kid. He's a 4.0 student, kind of fits the Michigan mold. And I love him as a player. I've always said that Beasley is the underrated guy in the state of Michigan. Right now, I think Michigan's in a good spot. They got him on campus multiple times in the fall, but I don't necessarily think it's a lock. Michigan State is a big factor here. His half brother Malik Carr plays for the Spartans. And Penn State made a big impression on him as well. Penn State has historically recruited well out of Belleville, and he was there for a weekend visit. Really enjoyed his time in Happy Valley. So Penn State definitely one to watch. Like I said earlier, landing Jacob Oden could definitely help with Jeremiah Beasley, and I think George Hilo, Jesse Minter, Steve Klingscale have all done a really good job of recruiting Beasley. But that one's a little bit of a tighter race, and it's still a little while to go. March 15th is his decision date, so more than a month away. Let's go ahead and go down to Ben Recht, and he says, what's the 2024 defensive line class going to look like? Numbers on edges, three techniques, nose tackles, and some names at the top of the board. Yeah, so I will say that Justin Scott, who we just talked about, is going to be a big priority as more of a nose guy. He can play the three technique as well, 6'5", 315 pounds, but super athletic, former basketball player, nimble on his feet. Alabama actually likes him as an offensive lineman. So I think Justin Scott is the priority up front as a nose potential three technique as well. A recruit that Mike Elston went down to see in Texas, that is quickly rising up the board as a potential three technique is Nigel Smith, top 100 prospect out of Melissa, Texas. Things are just starting to pick up with him, but he's certainly a name to file away. Really like Smith's game. He's been on the radar for quite some time. Elston finally decided to jump in the mix for him. So I could definitely see uh, Nigel Smith becoming, one of those tier one prospects if he isn't already. And you see his ranking here. I mean, he's a top 50 recruit on the on three consensus, number 7 defensive lineman, number 50 nationally. And then a guy I'll mention as an edge that's at the top of the edge board is Dylan Stewart out of Friendship Collegiate in Washington, D.C. Man, the DMV just produces nonstop elite edge guys. Dylan Stewart is the number one overall edge in the country per on three, the number five overall recruit nationally per on three. Absolutely love Dylan Stewart. I had a chance to see him live this fall. Go head to head with Nicholas Harbor actually, and Dylan Stewart was the most impressive player on the field for sure. So love Stewart. He visited Michigan last year. He's looking to come back for another visit at some point soon. He's definitely the guy up there. So I gave you one at each spot. For more on Michigan's, defensive line recruiting and all things recruiting, you can subscribe to the Wolverine and get more information for $29.99 until August 31st. Looks like we just hit time, so we're gonna do a little rapid fire here. Um, Answer a few more questions before we get out of here. Ben Recht also asked, "What's next in the Aaron Childs recruitment?" Would love to see him. Yeah, no, I love Aaron Childs. I think he's the best linebacker on Michigan's board. Personally, I think Aaron Childs has an argument as the best linebacker in the country. I think he's a five-star level prospect. He reminds me a lot of Junior Colson. I think he's the perfect scheme fit for Michigan. Childs told me that Michigan is the leader in his recruitment as far as what's next. He told me he plans to drop a top schools list, no definitive timeline. Let's go ahead and go down to KS. Who do you think will announce a commitment first, Marshall or Tatum? So Jordan Marshall, Taylor Tatum, the two top running backs on Michigan's board. I think Jordan Marshall would make a commitment earlier. Taylor Tatum told me he's not an early enrollee and is actually planning to take his recruitment into next January. So a long time to go with him. I think Marshall will decide sooner. Let's go ahead and go down to our last question, and it comes from Mike McNally, and he says, "What about the Learfield Allied NIL deal Michigan just finalized today?" So yes, Michigan has partnered with Learfield, which is um, a major player throughout college athletics. I think that's a nice deal from a team perspective, again, but you have to get a recruiting plan going. You have to have a base salary, something firm that you can sell to recruits. So it's nice to have all these partnerships and getting all these guys on the team deals. But in terms of the recruiting trail, I think you definitely need a firm plan. All right, guys, for more Michigan recruiting and for National Signing Day coverage, make sure to subscribe to the Wolverine.com today for just $29.99 until August 31st of this year. I will be on the road this weekend seeing some top Michigan targets. So make sure to follow me on Twitter at EJ Holland on 3 and make sure to like this video and subscribe to the Wolverine YouTube channel.